Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcus Fairs. I'm founder and editor-in-chief of Dezeen, the online architecture and design magazine. I'm delighted to be here to chair this Dornbracht Conversations number 8 with a fantastic lineup of people. From my far right, we have Rafael De Cardenas, who's based in New York but's flown in from Hong Kong. We have Lyndon Neri and Rosanna Hu you're based in Shanghai, and I think you've come from Shanghai. And I also have Holger Struck, who's the brand director at Dornbracht. The topic of our conversation, title of our conversation is Are Interior Trends Over? We're going to be discussing whether the eclectic style, as we call it in the UK, or the transitional style, as they call it in America, has kind of taken over as the kind of default style where anything goes, really. I mean, in the past, there were these sequence of isms, like Modernism was the last great one, and it's kind of not really gone away. That's what we're here to discuss. But first of all, I'm going to have a little conversation with Holger. Tell us about how did this collaboration come about? Why did you get involved in this concept of transitional design, and why did you bring in Rafael De Cardenas and Neri&Hu to work on this?
Mm-hmm. It's always good to get ideas from the outside, because you tend to think inside out all the time. And when we came up with the idea, I just mentioned medicine, terror, and then something in between, a hybrid. We thought about the story that would go with it, and that was for us transitional style. And we thought, why should we design the spaces ourselves? Why not ask somebody from this field, from architecture, to design a space, to interpret it in their language, in their artistic architectural language.
So now let's hear from the architects.
Thank you.
Do you consider that your work is in any particular style? Would you call it transitional? Would you call it eclectic? Or is it part of any ism? Where do you place yourself in the sort of design movements of history?
I think it's hard for an architect to kind of critique themselves and label themselves. I would like to think that we are beyond labeling, but I don't know if we would call ourselves a transitional or label ourselves as a transition style. I would say we're probably more of a bridging between time and space. Time meaning the past and the future, because we work with a lot of historic buildings and bring them towards the future. How to work with that history, and also bridging kind of east and west in some ways. Global and local. So maybe in that sense, it's a kind of transitional.
Lyndon, do you want to talk us through the work you've done for Dornbracht, and also give your observations on whether there's any particular style in your work?
Actually, when Dornbracht approached us with Miri, I was excited because I thought they were going to ask us to design a tap. And we received a package that the tap is already designed, and we couldn't touch it. So what we did was we were asked this question about transitional style. And there's this Chinese word that says jian, which if you mix jian with kongjian, it means space. If you put zongjian, it means middle. If you put sijian, that means time. So it's interesting, this whole notion of in between deals with time and space. So we were very interested in this idea of not so much transitional, but in between. And we thought that the in between is a space, not necessarily taking you from public to private, perhaps, or outside to inside, but that space needs to be dealt with. And we thought, why don't we take a particular space within the house or the room or the space of the introvert and deal with this transitional space. So we took a component of that particular house and dealt with the idea of what this transitional space would be. So most of the time, bathrooms or place of sanitary refuge are considered destination. So we made it a transitional space. So we did some sketches, and the idea that you are inside the space, you are neither outside or inside, and that in-between space is dry or wet, landscape and interior. So the idea of this constant transition, you don't really know where you are. All these dualities constantly dealt with in this particular space we're exploring?
We seem to be kind of ignoring the question of style. And when we talk about transition, we're talking about space. And when I think about style, I almost think that nowadays, nobody wants to talk about style. Nobody wants to be labeled with any style because they want to be beyond style. But that has become, like, no style has become the biggest style.
Rafael, do you have a view on whether trends are anything that actually mean anything, or is it just the media obsessively trying to come up with context?
I actually do think there are isms and styles and all these things do exist, and I think that there are lots of things that are popular. There's just a cacophony of voices. So I think you have less of a singular thing. Even like, just 10 years ago, there were kind of these stylistic tomes that kind of like predicted trends and that kind of thing. And I think that to some degree, that's just happening on a more fragmented level.
Would you think somebody could look at these projects and know that they're from the same person? Do you have a style?
I think no one likes to say they have a style, or I don't. I think I probably do. I'm still enamored by the first time I became aware of many things, and that was in the 80s. A lot of my references come from films in the 80s, and there probably is a kind of stylistic thread through that, although I don't want to be like the 80s guy or anything like that, because that would make me obsolete.
And now we come to the work that you've done with Dornbracht. So talk us through that. So you said earlier on that you didn't really understand the transitional style thing. So when they came to you with the transitional style brief, how did you respond to that?
I thought I could still satisfy the desire, the Dornbracht's desire, but also my own interests. And I actually did like the faucet, so it was not like, if I didn't like it, it'd probably be a challenge. So in that sense, it was probably very fluid and organic to work with it. I mean, I guess it is that curve of the escutcheon, right, that makes it kind of the transitional.
Are trends over? I mean, do we live in a different time now from before? Or has it always been like this, and we just, because we have a historical perspective, we look back and see a sequence of styles, architectural styles over the years that appear to have been dominant?
Transitional style is a style in itself. It's a period wherein people are somewhat lost, and maybe it's because of the speed in which technology is taking over. So I don't have an answer for you, Marcus, unfortunately, but I think it's a period wherein we really have to search ourselves. Architects, I mean, I'm looking at even the architects I admire today. I mean, have we had really breakthroughs in modern architecture?
Since the beginning of modernism, I feel, like what Lyndon said, we really haven't really gone that far. Maybe some people have try to be more futuristic than others, but that's just really in form and not so much in the content that we're all looking for. And it's almost like every ism seems to say or proclaim that they want to end the ism before that. And I think anytime you want to do something definitive, you actually get caught up in that claim, and you are not being definitive because something else will take over. So I would say, yes, we're saying that interior trend is over, but by saying that it's not over.
Rafael, do you have an opinion on that? It's like, do you agree with Rosanna that we're sort of stuck in modernism and a bit lost?
Modernism was never contemporary. If something's contemporary, it's kind of everything. It really holds a big spotlight, and modernism was always special. It was never everything. Like we were just saying earlier, Mies van der Rohe's Chicago, most people still had boomerang coffee tables that were teal Formica. So I do think that modernism kind of drags on, but I do think trends exist, and I think that interior trends specifically, they participate in fashion. That's actually where interior trends, and there are lots of trends, right? Like Yeezy's a trend, millennial pink and brass with white marble is a trend. I mean, if you go on Instagram, you see that a lot, So I don't think they're over. I just think that there are more voices and more subsets of them, and I think that offers more opportunity.
Where would a new revolutionary trend come from? What would be the seeds of that?
I actually think maybe the breakthrough is not through materials. Through technology, we're allowed to be, through Instagram, for instance, be connected, or through social media, see things much faster. I just think there's a time in which we have to digest this and understand, and I believe it's that next generation that will be able to take and bring a new paradigm.
We live in a pre-cultural moment in that the technology has moved forward so fast, the culture hasn't been able to catch up with it yet. Our brains haven't actually been able to process what it means, and you see that happening in terms of the influence of Facebook and Twitter, and we haven't kind of figured out what that means for democracy and society. Could you think you could draw parallels with design? We're sticking with modernism because we don't understand the tools that we have and the implications of them, maybe.
And I wonder why we're even talking about trends. And I wonder whether the question should be not whether it's over, but whether trends are important at all. Because I think trends are for, commercial marketing. And we want to have an idea of what will sell. We want to know what the market wants. And that's why we need to know what the trends are. But now that there is social media, now that there's a different way, a much more kind of, direct way of knowing what people want and also being able to make predictions. Maybe we no longer need trends because it's no longer about that every, trend presumes that the society or a group of people will want the same thing. But actually, we no longer need that because customization or different ways of manufacturing are able to give us exactly what we want. So I don't need to be wanting the same thing that my neighbor wants. I want that very specific color, that very specific size and style, and I'm going to get that because the new way of manufacturing is going to allow that. So I think that's all going to come with the changing of technology.
I love the fact that you just agreed that when you were at school, style was a dirty word. But maybe voice is a term that we can settle on because it feels more personal and a way that we can talk about style without using the word style.
Someone just said that trends are something that come kind of top down, and I think that just made me realize that's actually what's changed. Trends are actually coming from the bottom up. Nike and Converse, they're not shooting models anymore. They're shooting like the kid that films in his backyard and has 500,000 followers because he's done something, and that seems interesting to me. And how that populates our visuals is like, it's frightening because it lacks control. There's no way to control that, and I think that is also a scary thing, but that's potentially an interesting thing.
It's been a really fascinating conversation. I think that Rafael's point that trends are coming from the bottom up is like quite a profound observation about the transitional time that we live in. I'd like to thank my panelists very, very much. I'd like to thank Dornbracht very, very much for inviting us, and particularly all of you for coming and listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.